So anyway, since that time, I've gone after many different things. Peter Popoff, the evangelist, said he was getting the word of God. Randy came to Houston in 1986.
Is that the guy that had the earpiece in?
Yeah, I found the earpiece.
Oh, you found that?
That was me. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
So Randy was writing an article. I think it was Hustler magazine. It was one of those magazines.
That's hilarious.
On evangelists. It was
that's,
either. It was
that's
Hustler.
A good place to hide something.
It was one of
Nobody
those
will ever read
magazines. It may not have been Hustler, so I don't want you to quote me on that.
Penthouse did a lot of those.
Great articles.
Maybe
That's what I'm saying. It might have been Penthouse, but I don't think it was.
Playboy did a lot.
I think it was Hustler, but I could be wrong.
Playboy is one of the ones that people actually read because the girls never take their panties off. So you get bored with just looking at breasts.
They do now, though. Didn't they go back to?
Well, they don't.
Right?
No, they were. No. They went to
I quit
nude
looking
at all.
after they did not nude at all.
Congratulations.
Done.
Yeah. You show amazing willpower, sir.
Yeah.
They went to like bikinis or underwear. They stopped taking their clothes off, but then sales inexplicably tanked.
Wonder why?
It's so strange.
Yeah, those articles are great.
They did have good articles.
They did.
Playboy had some amazing interviews.
They had a lot of groundbreaking articles too through the years.
A buddy of mine had a book of all the different Playboy interviews over the years, and I was like, well, they have some good stuff.
Yeah. So Randy.
Anyway, Randy.
Writing
for Hustler.
Yeah, writing for Hustler on Evangelist. He said, hey, do you want to come see this evangelist with me? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll come. So went there, and there's about 10,000 people. It's downtown, big auditorium, Houston, huge auditorium, all these people sitting around. And Popoff comes out on stage. He starts saying he's getting the word of God. He's telling people their names, information about who their doctors are, what their ailments are, and he starts healing people of cancer. He starts healing people of blindness, people walking again, and it was really, really emotional. Even for me, I had tears in my eyes, but I knew it was all bullshit. But I had tears.
You knew it was bullshit, and you still were crying.
You get this whole fucking like when you see a little kid crying and running down the aisle, you know.
Right.
You want to get angry, but at the same time, it's like it's just so emotional. It's just you get caught up in this whole thing. You just do. So he asked for people to collect money. He's just asking random people to come up, grab a bucket, go collect money. I got down there. I remember it was like the 15th bucket. I got my bucket. I walk around. I get checks. I got probably about I don't know how much, 10 grand, 20 grand. I don't know. You know what I've got. I mean money. First of all, getting money. Then you got to. I think I'm done. He said, nope. Yeah, okay. Want you guys to go back out and collect checks. So now we're going out getting checks in the bucket.
What?
Then it's like go out get sealed offerings, and people are dropping envelopes in there with like watches, rings, and stuff like that. As I come back, I hand the bucket up to Popoff, and I look up and I notice that he's got a piece of plastic in his ear. I go back to Randy and I say, Randy, I said, look, either this man or God doesn't like him enough to heal him, and he's got a hearing aid, or something else is going on. I don't know what, but something else is going on, and I think that's how he's getting information. And Randy was like, no, he's using mnemonics. Mnemonics are basically memory systems, all right? I have to use a lot of mnemonics to memorize things because otherwise I have major issues. And I know a lot about mnemonics. You either memorize a lot about things about a few things, or you memorize a few things about a lot of things, but you don't memorize a lot of things about a lot of things. And he was memorizing a lot of things about a lot of things if that was the case. I said, I don't think so. So they went out to the next Popoff congregation thing, which was in San Francisco. Got a friend of ours from Alec Jason, I think his name is, who's an electronics engineer and knows everything about electronics. And he brought this little scanner and dressed up as a security guard, hanging out in the back. And he was scared to death he was going to get caught. Nobody questioned him. He's there in a security outfit. And he scans all the frequencies ahead of time, and he blocks out every one of those frequencies that are known frequencies. The moment Popoff hits the stage, a brand new frequency pops up. And turns out, I think it was 37 point. I can tell you in just a second here. It was, where was that? The frequency that he was on was, I thought it was right. 39.7 megahertz. That's what God broadcasts on, and it sounds an awful lot like Peter Popoff's wife. So what we did was we taped all this and went to the Johnny Carson show. This is how long ago that was now, on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Randy takes it on the Tonight Show, and keep in mind that Popoff would tape every single one of his shows and sort of edit it real time as well.
You put them on television?
Yeah, he would put them all on television. This is how he made, tons of. I mean, they had a monthly budget. I think it was like $550,000 every single month. That's that was their working budget. That's not the money they were actually making. So God knows how much they.
So that's how much they were spending.
That's how much they were spending. Yeah. So
God, what a dirty business.
Yeah, I tell you,
it's so dirty. It's so dirty to just lie to people like that.
I would make a great evangelist if I wasn't ethical.
Yeah,
there are times like, oh God, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So on the Tonight Show, they play the footage that they have from his TV show. They play all that, and then they play. Oh, and this was the one time that Johnny always wanted to know everything that was going to happen. Like, he didn't want any surprises, but his staff said, "No, you want to be surprised by this. Trust us." So sure enough, they play that footage, and then they play the footage with Popoff's wife, and she's saying things like, hey, Petey, the first thing she says, Petey, nod your head if you can hear me, because if you don't, we're going to have trouble tonight. And he nods his head as he's talking, doing his whole evangelical thing. Then she starts saying, oh, there's a live one up in the back. She's got cancer in her breasts. Make her run up and down the aisle and shake those breasts. It's just all this and there's a lot of nasty stuff. Some of that stuff we couldn't play on this Night Show, but we showed enough. And
so just a disdain, a mocking of these people.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
she actually had breast cancer, and she's telling her.
Oh yeah, these people do. Yeah, it's real ailments that all these people. Well, almost real ailments. I'll get to that in a second, because we sent some stooges in, and so. Yeah, just nasty, nasty stuff. But anyway, the stuff we showed on the Tonight Show, Johnny sits there, and he didn't like to edit his shows either. But he had to edit this because the moment that came on, Johnny's like, oh, shit. And you couldn't say shit on TV back then. And so he had to edit that out at that point. And he says, like, do they know about this? And like, nope, they do now. And at first, Popoff tried to say that we hired actors to be his wife. And then when it was obvious that we didn't, he then came out and says, I thought everybody knew that I used that to enhance the word of God.
Oh.
And it took a long time for him to go on. And now here's the crappy thing about this, right? When I was there, he's doing stuff like telling people to throw their medications up on stage. You don't need them. God's going to take care. Imagine somebody throws up some Digitalis pills or something they really, truly need and think God's going to heal them. So people do die from these things. And he was using a lot of other tricks. And part of the way he was getting the information was this, right? So people fill out prayer cards ahead of time. And they put them in these boxes in the back of the room. When nobody's really paying attention, the boxes get switched out. So all those prayer cards with all this information goes backstage to the wife, and she's able to send that information to him. Another thing, she would come out on stage. People come to these things hours and hours ahead of time, like literally, and they leave the hospital on carts and everything else. And she would walk out and she'd say, hi, I'm Mrs. Popoff. I hope my husband gets to you tonight. Where are you from? Oh, that's nice. What's wrong with you? Oh, well, I'll pray for you. And she gets all this information. Again, she'd go back. She had a big tape recorder in her purse, and she would write that information down. Another one was what I call like the Catherine Coleman trick. And Catherine Coleman was an evangelist way, way back who had all these great, great little like scam trick things. And what they do is they wait for somebody to come walking in with a cane. And they can walk, but not well, and they're using a cane. They walk up to them and say, you know what? Wouldn't you be much more comfortable in a wheelchair? And we can put you right up front. You'll be right next to the reverend. Who's going to say no to that? So they get pushed up in the wheelchair, and as they're pushing them along, they say, where are you from? Who's your doctor? What's wrong with it? They're getting all this information. Go back out, write the information down, and give it Mrs. Popoff. So the wheelchair's sitting there. Reverend comes out at some point. He can look at that person. He says their name, and he says, we've never talked before. We've never met before, have we? Because they haven't. It was the usher that was pushing him down that got that info. He says, God says you can be healed. Now, God said, I'm getting from God that you can't walk. Is that right? And the guy's sitting there, he's thinking, this is a man of God, right? So I'm not contradicting him. And he must mean never be able to walk properly again. That's what he's saying. He's saying that my doctor says I can never walk properly again. So he doesn't contradict him. He says, I say you can. God says you can. Stand up. The man stands up. Well, that's your first miracle, because everybody else, their perception is this guy is in that wheelchair, cannot walk. He says, take a few steps. Guy takes a few steps. You got that beat as well, right? So now you've got the emotion going even more, because here's a man that couldn't even walk. He stood, and now he walked. Popoff then goes and gets in the wheelchair and sits in it. He says, walk to the back of the wheelchair. And the guy hobbles to the back of the wheelchair. He says, push me. And the guy pushes him. Real miracle, right? But think about it. That wheelchair is now acting like a freaking walker.
Yeah.
And then the great climax to the whole piece of this trick is he takes the wheelchair, puts it back where it is, and he says to him, now that's your wheelchair. Meaning, Joe, like if you got up right now, walked across the room and say, Joe, that's your chair, you'd say yes. Well, it actually is your chair, you own it. But I mean, in normal circumstances,
Right.
let's say you were in my studio, you'd go yes. Doesn't mean it's your chair. It just means it's where you're sitting in that moment.
Right.
So the person sits down and you've seen this whole miracle. So he's got all these tricks like that. The old trick of one leg's longer than the other and you make them both the same size.
Isn't also people get caught up in the moment and they're on television, they want it to be real, and they get
I think that's in a
emotionally
lot.
invested?
That's a lot of things, but I don't think so in this case. I think this is more of a religious thing that people truly believe. And when you have, it's like when I was talking in tongues when I was young. You know, I've got all this dopamine, I got all this adrenaline flowing through my body.
You really believe?
You get caught up, and it's like when I was watching it. You know, I'm getting caught up. I'm having all this reaction in my body, despite the fact I know it's all bullshit. I'm still having this entire reaction. You know, it's. You know, mediums, to me, the worst scum out there right now are the mediums. And why do I say that? Because they're taking advantage of a person in a vulnerable moment in their life.
Yeah.
And they're doing it for their own gain. They're also doing it for money. And a lot of people will say, well, they're making them feel good. You know what? I can give crack to a junkie. Doesn't mean it's good for him, right? The grieving process is a natural part of the state that you have to go through to stay with the living. We had a very good friend whose son died of cancer. 10 years old, died of cancer. She's understandably has this huge gaping hole, right? This huge gaping hole where she's just feeling sad, she's upset, she needs to fill it with something. Normally, you turn to your family for those things, but she met a medium who convinced her she could talk to her dead son. So she stopped talking to her 2 living daughters. She stopped talking to her husband. She started talking to the medium and talking to her dead son. Almost ended up with a divorce, almost lost her entire life as a result. And this happens all the time. And it is so, so sad.
They're
and
dirty people.
Very dirty people. You
That
know?
Long Island medium, you ever watch that
Yeah,
television show?
Teresa Caputo.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Oh.
fucking like. And the worst part is the networks that edit the stuff to make it look even better.
They don't give a fuck.
know,
They're
no.
just trying to make money.
They're just trying to make money. That's all. They don't care about these
I mean,
people.
they somehow or another feel like they're not a part of the scam. I mean, they're literally committing fraud.
They are. No, I agree. They're perpetrating the fraud.
Well, the network's not involved. What it is a production company. The production company's bringing it to the network, but the network should know the process.
The
if they're gonna
network
put it on
often
television.
knows what's going on. They know it's bullshit, but it's like,
They
you know
can
what?
kinda
It's going to get us
distance
good
themselves.
ratings. It's going to do this. Let's promote it. Let's push it. You know,
that
they
was
show
an
up on
issue
set.
on Sci-Fi on the network. They didn't want me just debunking everything.
No.
And I had to tell them. I said the problem is everything's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not that I'm trying to debunk everything. We're just really looking at it.
Yeah.
And everything's bullshit.
Well, it's why in my show, I started to go on this a little bit ago, the show Telepathy, where I talk about telepathy and what it is and everything else. But as I'm doing it, I'm performing. And there's a part in that show where I feel really, really dirty and I feel really, really bad, but I feel like I have to do it. And I actually talk to some people's dead relatives in that show. And it's like the most despicable, horrible thing. And it makes me want to cry every time I do it. But it's because in the second half of the show, I go, what is telepathy? Well, I think I know what it is. I think it's a subset of magic. I think it's a form of entertainment, and a very cruel form of entertainment. I know I played with emotions, if many of you here this evening. But how else can I convince you on an emotional level and
Right.
on a logical level that
you
this
can do
is
this.
bullshit? Because
Yeah,
here's the
right.
thing, right? It's like your friend. They've had this one experience that's an emotional experience, meeting the psychic and the psychic telling them.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell them, hey, well, I got this friend Banachek that could do that same thing for you, he's going to go, yeah, but this is, you know, or if I
Right.
do it,
I have to say, Banachek's a real
or if I
psychic.
try
You have to meet him.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then I do it, and he goes, wow, that guy's real. And then now you say it's bullshit. Now they'll think a little bit and go, well, you know what? I had that same emotional experience. I had that same feeling. Maybe I'll look at it. My job, I feel, is never to break down a person's belief systems. You know, you can believe whatever you want. You know, that's fine, so long as you're not hurting anybody else. I'm kind of sort of okay with it. But the big thing is, the problem that I have is with the people that are taking advantage of those people's beliefs.
You're right.
Because there's always wolves in sheep's clothing. That
Well,
are willing
there's
to
all
take
these